Hey everybody, how's it going? So this is part 8 of my favorite 100 albums, 3 episodes to go. We're really getting into the heart of the list right now, and I told you before, some of these are not going to make sense. Most of them will make sense, but some of them you're just going to scratch your head being like, what are you thinking? And this is going to be one of them. But this is an album that I have loved since I bought it on cassette back in the 1980s, and I still listen to it today, and I still enjoy it very much, and that's why it's ranked so high on my list. I'm talking about Level 42, and this is their album World Machine. Now, if you've never heard of Level 42, they're sort of in the sophistopop genre, which if you don't know what that is, it's basically kind of a hybrid of jazz, synth pop, some elements of new wave, but it was a little bit higher brow than some of the other synth pop music that was coming out. Bands like ABC, Simply Red, think along those lines. So this music, the music sounds like Simply Red or Sade. It's kind of got a jazz element to it. Mark King is an amazing bassist, and he really is sort of the front man of the group. But this had the smash hit. There was a video on MTV, Something About You. Most people know them. They think of them as a one-hit wonder because that's really one of the few hits they had, although they did have Lessons in Love on their follow-up album. But I love this album. And if you like jazz music, or I guess maybe more like what they call smooth jazz or jazz fusion. It's got a little bit of that, got a little bit of synth pop mixed in there, but I love this record. It's great songwriting. This is the US version, and so like sometimes the US label would take tracks from earlier albums and put them, it's kind of what this is. They took some tracks from an earlier album that they had, just a few, and I think they padded it out very well, but I love this record. All right, number 29, Depeche Mode, Violator. Yes, this is my favorite Depeche Mode album, and I really vacillated between this and Black Celebration. I also like songs from Faith and Devotion a lot, so consider songs of Faith and Devotion kind of a, what do we call it, like a runner-up or an honorable mention. But Violator, I saw Depeche Mode on this tour, and it was really when I got heavily into Depeche Mode. I had some of their cassettes before, but seeing them live was when I really decided, like, I'm all in on Depeche Mode. Went and bought all their back catalog, and I'm still buying their music to this day. But this album really broke them through to a wider audience. You had Personal Jesus, which was the lead-off single that came out in the fall of '89, and then you had Enjoy the Silence, came out as a single in the spring of 1990, right ahead of this album being released. But you also have World in My Eyes, one of my favorite Depeche Mode songs. You got Policy of Truth on here. You got some deeper tracks like Clean, which is amazing and especially ironic, considering David Gahan was about to not get clean and totally dive into the world of being a heroin user. But this album is great. I had college friends who were total metalheads back in the day. And if you hear this background noise, I'm doing this on a Sunday. I got my family here. I can't help it. They're home. So it's not a ghost. It's not an apparition. It just is what it is. So I apologize. But anyway, what was I saying about this? So yeah, I enjoy some of the deeper tracks like Clean. And one of my favorites is Waiting for the Night with that kind of like moody, pulsating synthesizer. But yeah, great album. And I think this really kind of won them over. Some of the people who to this point were kind of Depeche Mode, anti-Depeche Mode, or not really interested in their kind of music. 28. Back to the Stones for Beggar's Banquet, the first in a series of Jimmy Miller masterpieces that the Stones would release. And Brian Jones is credited on this album, but I think his participation is minimal, which is kind of unfortunate because Brian Jones really was at the forefront of introducing new sound textures into the Rolling Stones catalog, or whatever you want to call it. He kept them up to speed with the Beatles, basically. And by this point, he was just kind of losing interest. I think he had not been a fan of the whole Satanic Majesty's Request project, was more a blues purist, and so just kind of decided, I'm just going to get stoned and lay on the studio floor. And he was having some legal issues because of some drug busts that had been. So this would be the last album to feature any meaningful participation from Brian Jones. But nonetheless, Mick and Keith totally fill the void. Sympathy for the Devil, one of the all-time greatest Rolling Stones song. And then to lead off side 2, Street Fighting Man. You got some great bluesy kind of return to form, like Parachute Woman, Dear Doctor is a great little twangy country song. Straight Cat Blues is amazing. Prodigal Son is great. Even the Factory Girl, which again is another kind of one of those Mick Jagger affecting a southern twang to his voice, and the epic Salt to the Earth. But this album was a great foreshadowing of things to come. 67, Led Zeppelin, Houses of the Holy. Man, this is jam-packed with great song. People say if there's one weak spot on this album, it's the crunge, but I happen to actually kind of like the crunge. I understand they were going for like a James Brown groove on that song, so I can appreciate that. But highlights for me are No Quarter. I love The Song Remains the Same, Straight Into the Rain song. I'm a big fan of The Ocean, obviously, who isn't? That was played all over the radio, as well as Dancing Days. Jamaica is a great song on here. Over the Hills and Far Away, I love the way that that starts, and I love the way that it ends. Just a perfect Led Zeppelin album. Even the cover, I don't mind too much, but I've heard somebody say the gatefold is actually better artwork than the outside, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. Number 66, gonna do a little Steely Dan. Yes, my favorite Steely Dan album. By this point, they weren't really a band. They were more a collection of studio musicians that Becker and Fagan were auditioning at the time. But yeah, this is a solid Steely Dan album, and I think really kind of led the way for a lot of that jazz fusion that became popular kind of in the late 70s, early 80s. But this is their most fully realized album. You got the hits on here, Deacon Blues, Josie were on the radio, Peg as well with the great Michael McDonald harmonies and back. But even Asia, what a great track that is. And if you ever watch the video about the making of Steely Dan and just showing how they auditioned different people to do the drumming and the guitar solos and just all the elements, they knew exactly what they wanted, and they were going to go through, burn through as many session musicians as they needed to. This had to have been a really expensive album to make. Because besides Walter Becker and Donald Fagen, you got a whole cast of some of the premier studio musicians at their disposal, and it's an amazing result. All right, now we are on, what is this, 60, this is 65, that was 66. See, I lose my count every single time I do this. All right, 65, Morrison Hotel. This was them rebounding from, I don't want to say the failure of the Soft Parade, but they took a lot of heat for Soft Parade. Some people consider that to be the Doors' worst album, but I consider this to be a great rebound. They're back to the blues. Jim Morrison is in fine voice. Great songwriting here. Roadhouse Blues, obviously the opening track was one that most people would know, but I love Peace Frog, right into Blue Sunday. Even the second side where you got some deeper tracks like The Spy, Queen of the Highway is great, Maggie McGill, what a great blues rocker, great way to close out the album. But yeah, the Doors were back and silencing some of their critics. But I love the Soft Parade. It's just not on my 100 list. 64. Music from Big Pink by the band. The band had been Bob Dylan's backup band on his 66 tour, the one where he really got booed big time for having an electric band behind him. They were known as the Hawks back then, and then they got their own record contract. Albert Grossman, who managed Bob Dylan, took up management for the band, and they holed up in Woodstock, New York, and put together a fantastic record. I don't think this was recorded in Woodstock. I think this was actually recorded in LA, if I'm not mistaken. But the genesis of all these songs, they wrote them in Woodstock, the actual big pink house right here, which they were renting. If you've ever heard the Basement Tapes, Bob Dylan and the band, that's sort of where that real songwriting partnership began in earnest. And this is absolutely my favorite record of theirs, and just a stunning collection of songs. You got Robbie Robertson, who was at the peak of his songwriting skills on here, but I love some of the Dylan covers too. Tears of Rage, with that affecting vocal by Richard Manuel, is just heartbreaking. And I love, obviously, The Weight was a big song off of here, but so many cool tracks just from start to finish. Another great slice of Americana. I know I said when I was talking about Working Man's Dead that they kind of invented Americana. Don't forget about the band. This actually predated Working Man's Dead by a few years, and I love it just as much. Okay, number 63. My last Bob Dylan entry, maybe. But what a great one if it is. Highway 61 Revisited. Now, I know Blonde on Blonde is a great album. I know Bringing It All Back Home is a great album. I know John Wesley Harding is a great album. But as far as a 60s album go, this one is the one that I reach for the most. Every single song on here, for whatever reason, I enjoy more than I think any other Bob Dylan album. Like Rolling Stone, obviously, is epic. Ballad of a Thin Man is great. Highway 61 Revisited. And the way just his lyrical, his prowess, the way that he can just make nonsense all sound so lyrical, and the fact that he could be funny, but he could be topical. You know, some of these, like the whole Mr. Jones, in the Ballad of a Thin Man, where he's singing to Mr. Jones, was very much kind of a protest song, but in a veiled kind of a way. It Takes a Lot to Laugh. It Takes a Train to Cry is a fantastic song. I just love everything about this. Tombstone Blues is great, but this is Dylan flexing his muscles in the mid-60s. Nobody could touch him. He knew he was at the top of the pack, and it's such an enjoyable album to listen to. And I've always wondered, just the whole weirdness of who's that in the background. He's got a roach clip here in his hand, and it's like, what you gonna do about it? I'm Bob Dylan. So love that record. 62. Let's do some more Pink Floyd. Wish You Were Here from 1975. It took me a while. I remember when I bought this on cassette because all my friends were like, Wish You Were Here. When they knew I was getting into Pink Floyd, they're all like, you got to hear Wish You Were Here. And I was a huge fan of Dark Side of the Moon. I loved The Wall. And I put this on, and I'm like, what the hell? It's just such a slow burn, that Shine On You Crazy Diamond opening, where you've got the glasses, the wine glasses or whatever it is, that slow hum that builds. You got Rick Wright's that whole thing. I was just like, I'm not down with this. And then David Gilmour finally comes in on the guitar, and then you're waiting some more. You're checking your watch, like, okay, somebody gonna start singing here. And then finally you got Roger Waters, who kicks in with the vocal at that point. I guess I was very impatient, and I wasn't really prepared to really get into an album that took this long. It's very atmospheric. It's very slow in terms of how it introduces the Shine On You Crazy Diamond themes. But I love this album now. Like, if you can spend some time with this record, give it your undivided attention, and just appreciate all the nuances of the songs. And I love they still retain that audio verite element to this record, like the sound effects that you have on Welcome to the Machine, and then that little transition from Have a Cigar into the song Wish You Were Here, where you got somebody playing with the radio dial. It's just magic. And even Have a Cigar, which is sung by, it's not sung by any of the members of the band of Pink Floyd. It was sung by Roy Harper, the Roy Harper of Hats Off to Roy Harper, Led Zeppelin, renowned. For some reason, David Gilmour didn't want to sing it. Roger Waters wasn't satisfied with his vocal attempt, and so they brought in Roy Harper. I think he was recording in the studio next door, and they said, hey, will you come have a try? I think it's a brilliant vocal. I can't imagine. I've heard the alternate takes where Roger Waters tries to sing it, and he does a terrible job. Roy Harper knocks it out of the park. For a while, I thought it might have been Roger Waters until I read otherwise, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, it's a perfect fit for that song, perfect fit for Pink Floyd, and a great answer to a trivia question. But yeah, even the second, at the end of side 2, where you've got more of that Shine On Crazy Diamond, and it moves into the different parts, I still even love that. Some of it I thought was hokey back in the day, but now I don't care. I think from start to finish, I love it all, and one of my favorite Floyd albums. It's very hard to rank because there's 3 Floyd albums that I'm always going back and forth on, which is my favorite on any given day. But when I really sit down and think about it, this is close, but no cigar, no pun intended. So I'm kind of giving away. There may be more Floyd left in my list. And number, what are we on? Number 21. Are we getting that close to the end? Holy cow. Number 21, Beatles Revolver. And there are going to be people who rank this as their favorite Beatle album, and I totally get it. It seems like for a while, it was the accepted, I guess, opinion to have Sgt. Pepper as number 1. Sgt. Pepper was their masterpiece. But then people started taking, Revolver a bit more seriously and realizing what a great album this was. Starts off with Taxman, first album that they dared open with a George Harrison song, and that counting 1, 2, 3. Never been done before. Very cool. Tomorrow Never Knows, the last track on here, was actually the first to be recorded, which I always thought was very cool. But you have Good Day Sunshine, which could have been a single. Yellow Submarine, whether you think it's a kid song or not, is great on here. She Said with that remarkable Ringo drumming is great. What do I like better, the US, the UK? Well, you have to go with the UK because you can't say that there's addition by subtraction when you're getting rid of Dr. Robert and Your Bird Can Sing. It's just not a better album, the US. I made the argument with Rubber Soul, but I still think that the songs on here, or the album benefits from the songs on here that were on the UK pressing. So yeah, this is my American copy, but I'm speaking on behalf of the UK pressing of this. Revolver is just amazing, but as far as I'm concerned, still not my most enjoyable Beatle album, but there's no terrible Beatle album, and this one is going to fall just out of the top 20 by the grace of some really remarkable albums that are on my list that are yet to come. So yeah, anyway, that is my list. I think some of you are like, okay, finally we're getting some more of the records that I know and love. And I'm really interested to see what people think of my top 20. I don't imagine there's going to be any huge shockers, but to some of you, they may be a little controversial. So anyway, hope you're doing great. Thanks for watching as always, and take care.